overseas looking nice. Room service if I like, I order twice. Hibachi, got the gravy on the rice. Rolling in Mexico.
Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome into another edition of the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts, and I am happy to be here live with you on a Sunday night. I know a lot of you probably watching some Olympics action. Go USA, represent well. I think it's some swimming, maybe some gymnastics on tonight. I've got some swimming pulled up here in front of me while we do the show. But hey, I am going to, looks like I'm going to be solo doing this show this week. I had a guest lined up, but I'm not sure if they can make it. So we will see if I'm able to get him on a little bit later. If not, though, that is okay, and it'll just be me. And but we'll still have plenty to talk about with training camp here upon us. The first week is complete of Steelers training camp, and I know it's been 4 practices now, and it is far from over. There's so much more coming our way, but it's been an interesting first 4 days, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Russell Wilson missed the first 4 practices with a calf injury that he sustained during the conditioning event on arrival day. So when you're talking about a 36-year-old quarterback who is participating in a conditioning test, you know, that's something to be concerned about. And the fact that he pulled something enough to where they felt comfortable were more comfortable leaving him out of it for the first 4 days when it's no pads, you're just getting in the swing of things, you know, trying to get in a role as far as the process and how each day is going to play out. It makes total sense. And I'm not going to sit here and be one of those guys that predicts that, oh, Justin Fields is now, you know, inching closer to that pole position that Russell Wilson had when training camp, quote unquote, started, because he's been the one on the field and Russ has not. But I will say this, you are getting a chance to see unfiltered, unabridged Justin Fields on the field for the Steelers in training camp. And needless to say, it's been up and down. And I think that if you're following closely to a lot of things coming up or coming out of training camp, whether that be from the beat writers or, you know, from Mike Tomlin and the interviews or things that Steelers.com is putting out, I think you're seeing a kind of a step back approach from, I guess, labeling Justin Fields as anything other than the guy filling in for the starter while he is out and waiting to be better. So if that is the case, then I would assume that Russell Wilson is in no jeopardy of losing the starting job as it stands today. And I think Justin Fields, what you're seeing from him is exactly what makes him the tantalizing quarterback that we see when we watch some of his highlights, but also the frustrating quarterback that he can be when we watch the full game. There's going to be highs and lows. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be incredible plays, and you're seeing that. So I think let's bring up the first question here that I want to talk about from Daniel Red. Did Fields look as good today as the headlines portrayed? I'm going to say, based on what I've seen, based on the angles that we've gotten, I think that it's kind of just been exactly what you expect. And which, again, is to me, big plays, crazy plays, but also some head scratchers as well. So I think that is how it's been. I think he's steadily improving. And I think that the offense overall may be getting their feet under them a little bit more. We talked about this plenty of times across our platform, that the Steelers offense, it's going to take them time to get up to speed because there's so many new faces, so much change on that side of the ball. And the defense hasn't had really any of that. Yeah, there have been some additions and some subtractions of players, but that's a scheme that's much further ahead on this team. It's a lot of continuity. Mike Tomlin heads the whole thing up, let's be honest. And the offense is going to take time, but I think what you are seeing is that the offense is adjusting, getting up to speed a little bit. There are going to be some good days. There are going to be some rough days, but that is Justin Fields, and that is going to be the Steelers' offensive production in training camp. So I think the Afton Forehead asks a really good question here. I've seen Fields looks great and Fields looks terrible. Is there any way to know which is true? Afton, I think the answer is probably right in the middle. I really do. I think that there is a side of Justin Fields that is incredible. That's jaw dropping. And there's a side where it's head scratching and you don't know what to do with the information. So that is the Justin Fields experience. And it is something that I think we're going to be privy to over the next few weeks. I do have a couple other questions starred here. So let me go back. This is a big question. Oh, okay. Excuse me. This is a big question that we've gotten a lot from our fans and from listeners, is just the fact that, can we win a playoff game? And I think the Steelers have a good shot at winning a playoff game. I think that is something that they will definitely be in the running for. And I say that because you've got more experience, you've got a better offensive scheme to kind of match what the defense does, and you've got two quarterbacks, I think, that can take you a good distance if you have the right team around them. I think the Steelers are a much better fit for both of these quarterbacks than we have seen in the past. Let's move on to this question from Christopher 11. How big of an improvement will our inside linebacker room be? Christopher, I think this is outside of maybe the change in quarterbacks. This is the number one biggest change that you'll find, is that this linebacker group is going to be special. I believe that with all that is in me right now. I believe in the Peyton Wilson hype. I believe in the Patrick Queen. I believe in his abilities. I believe in his hype as well. And I believe in just the solid, be in the right place, playmaking ability of Landon Roberts. And I think that you're going to see all that gel and combine into a dynamic group that is going to be off the charts dynamic this season. I really do. And I'm super excited for it, extremely excited for it. Let's see here. This is a good question from Gene. Gene, I'm not going to even try to pronounce your last name, but since when have Steeler fans settled for just winning a playoff game? I think it's been a while in coming because we haven't had one of those, and your expectations are lowered as your team fails to live up to those expectations, is what I'm trying to say. So I think that's a fair assessment of Steeler Nation right now, is like, yeah, we want Super Bowls, but we haven't been a team ready for that yet. And so winning a playoff game would be a nice step in the right direction. And here's hoping that we can get there. And so I think that plays into this as well. Let's see here. We just talked this question here. Okay. From Joseph. Joseph, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name either, Joseph. I apologize, you guys. Your thoughts on getting overhyped about this year, considering last year's preseason start leading to reality in the regular season? Absolutely. I think that there is a real danger of getting overhyped for the season. However, I will say this, that the bones that we see here lead me to be a little more optimistic than maybe we should have been last year. Like, the level of optimism from last year was, okay, Kenny Pickett hopefully comes into his own here and he becomes the guy for the Steelers. And if that happens, maybe he can make up for some of the issues with Matt Canada's offense. But Matt Canada did have a really strong running game to close out 2022. So if that works in conjunction with Kenny Pickett, you're looking at a team that can be really dangerous. And we got overhyped about that. There's a lot of ifs this year too, but at least those ifs are if one of these tried and true quarterbacks works in Pittsburgh, then, or works in Pittsburgh in a tried and true offensive system, then maybe they're going to be better this year. So optimism this year makes a lot more sense than it did last year. I will not sit here and try to say that I was not in on the hype train last year. I really was. But I feel like foundationally, you have a few more things that you can get pumped about this offseason in the preparation for the regular season. Let's go ahead and take our break for the audio side. And when we come back, we're not going anywhere if you're listening live. When we come back, we're going to answer more questions. We're going to dive into more training camp news and notes. And we're going to stay right here on the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. And welcome back to the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts, and it doesn't look like I will be joined by our guest tonight. That is okay. We'll roll through this, and we will get a lot of information in here, trying to talk through training camp. The title says Latrobe Musings. It was supposed to be Latrobe Musings, but my computer decided that was not what it wanted to say. So Latrobe Musings, with week 1 of Steelers training camp in the books. John S. asks, any early training camp stories that may not be overreactions? I think the Jaylen Warren hype is real. As far as the conditioning he came in as and what the Steelers expect out of him, I think that's real. You're not hearing a lot about Najee Harris. You're really not hearing a lot about either running back, but it does seem like Jaylen Warren is very involved in the passing game, in the screen game specifically. Najee Harris is still going to be the lead rusher for this team. He's going to get the most carries, I believe. But I do think that when you're talking about hype for one guy, I think that Jaylen Warren is the guy to watch for the offense right now. I think another guy is Beanie Bishop. I don't think it's an overreaction to say that he's probably their best bet to get quality nickel snaps in 2024 before Cam Sutton gets back, and maybe after that as well. Let's not forget the Steelers have no commitment level to Cam Sutton other than the vet minimum deal that they paid him and prior associations with the player. But if Beanie Bishop comes out and plays high level nickel ball, then I think that he could easily become a guy that plays the whole season, and Cam Sutton's just a role player or a backup, a fill-in player if necessary by the time he comes back. So that makes a ton of sense to me. And I think that that's not an overreaction, what he's been able to provide. The other one I don't think is an overreaction is Roman Wilson getting up to speed. This is a guy I've mentioned since the Steelers drafted him. I think that he is the secret sauce. He's the dark horse potential winner of the wide receiver 2 job. And I think that can come out of the slot. I don't believe it has to be production on the opposite wide end of the field from George Pickens. I think that the wide receiver 2 production for the Steelers can come out of the slot. I think Roman Wilson can play both, but I think he's best out of the slot. And I think he's going to be a huge part of this offense. I don't think that Zach Azzani and Arthur Smith are going to care about getting him on the field as soon as possible. And so I think that that's going to be important. And I'm ready for the Steelers to see what Wilson can do. And I think that he's going to impress a lot of people. After for a really good question here. Do you think GP will improve with Azzani? I think he's suffered not having adequate leadership in the room. I do think that that's been part of the problem, is that there hasn't been a high level of accountability from the coaching staff, especially the coordinator. But I think that changes with Arthur Smith. He's a hard-nosed guy. So is Azzani. They don't mess around. So I think that you're talking about a couple guys here that can really bring something to the table. And so for Pickens, I just think he's a guy who, I was reading Alan Saunders earlier. He said it's a guy who wears his heart on his sleeve, and that's who he is. He's not a guy who's just gonna kind of tuck it all in and say what people want him to say. So, and there's room for that. I don't think that he has it. It's one way or the other. Like if he's the super talent, but he can't keep his head, then he's going to fail. I think he's super talented. I think he has trouble keeping his head at times, but I don't think that automatically makes him a failure. I think that it's it's a work in progress. He's only a third-year player. He's bound to get in here with Azani, and I think it's going to work. I think it's going to work in his favor. I think that group as a whole could use a little bit of a harder-nosed approach, and the Steelers agreed, and they went out and got 2 guys in Arthur Smith to man the offense as a whole, and Zach Azani to make sure that got done. So I really think that I wouldn't say he's a head case, George Pickens. I would say that he's a guy who needs some extra guidance, and I think Azani can do that absolutely. Afton, great question there. This is a good comment from Dennis Povlak. I want to bring it up. Honestly, the defense is still going to have to carry the load again this year. The offense will be better. How much remains to be seen? I 100% agree with this. The offense will be better. There's nowhere to go but up from the Matt Canada issues. However, it could take some time, and we've mentioned that too. It could start slow. Started slow in camp. It's continuing to develop. It's very rare that you get a team who changes offensive coordinator, who adds a bunch to key positions like quarterback, like receiver, like offensive line, and it's smooth sailing from the jump. Very few teams have that happen to them, and I wouldn't expect anything different from the Steelers. Now, by midseason, if the offense isn't rounding into form, I think you could have some concerns with, is this going to work? But I do think it's something that has to be in play right now. So, hey, awesome stuff. Blue Nose Steelhead, welcome into the chat. Hey, Jeremy, let me know when the SCN Fantasy Football League is happening. Haven't been too active on site, but still interested. Got to figure out my Discus password. So I think it's been too long comment. We're definitely going to do another couple SCN leagues. If you're interested in that, definitely hit me up on Twitter, X, at the Bets 93. I'll show you that again here at the Bets 93. Hit me up there if you're interested, and we might extend it to multiple leagues this year. I think we had 2 leagues last year. We might do more than that if we have to. I'd love to get as many involved as would want to be in here. So definitely hop in, man, and we'll get you back in. Okay, Eric Parker, great question. How have the new DBs Elliott and Jackson looked? As far as I can tell, Dante Jackson has looked phenomenal. And I've talked about this. He's the best cornerback 2 option the Steelers have had on the roster since Steven Nelson, at least, maybe beyond that. I think Dante Jackson, it was injuries that left him behind the last couple years. Last year, he was finally healthy and played a full season and was playing pretty good football, rounding into form. I think he's going to be a great fit for what the Steelers do on defense. Their scouting department obviously thought so. Their pro scouting department, when they made the trade to send Deontay Johnson over there and pick up Dante Jackson, I think it's going to be a move that looks really good for Pittsburgh. I think that Jackson's going to be a huge part of this defense if he can stay healthy. As far as Elliott goes, I haven't heard as much about like significant individual plays from him. There's been a couple here and there, but I just think his veteran presence, I think what he brings to the table as a versatile guy, allowing Minkah Fitzpatrick to be more Minkah, is going to play a huge role for the defense. To me, Deshaun Elliott is more of this is a piece we can add to elevate other pieces, as opposed to he is the guy coming in to make a difference individually. So his presence elevates Minkah. It elevates Joey Porter Jr. It even elevates I'm sorry. It's not one of the Keanus. It's the other safety, DeMonte Casey. I think that can help. So he's kind of a force multiplier more than he is an individual star. But I think that there's a place for that, obviously, and it's a huge part of what the Steelers want to do. So great question, Eric. I do think both of those guys are going to be a huge part of this defense. Brian Brown, when is the Steelers' first preseason game? That is a great question. Let me pull it up. I think it's a week from Friday, a week from this coming Friday, but let me double check here. Steelers preseason schedule. I can't even remember who the first team they play is. I think it's Houston. Okay, on August 9th. So yes, Friday. So I was correct. It's the a week from this coming Friday. So we've got 12 days. 12 days till the first Steelers preseason game. Somebody else probably got to this before I did. Yes. There it is from Jod Edborg. August 9th against the Texans. So yeah, absolutely ready for the action. I cannot wait, but we've got a lot of time to see how some things shake out, and that's going to be good in practices as well. So, okay, great question from Pittsburgh. Toddy86, is there enough wide receiver depth, or is it necessary to look elsewhere? I think the depth is fine. Whether or not you have two high enough end starters to make the depth okay is the question to me. And I tend to lean more to, yes, you're going to have a couple guys that could develop into that. Between the talents of Van Jefferson, Roman Wilson, and Calvin Austin III, I think that you've got a group of guys there that can act as the wide receiver 2 production that you need for this team. And in that case, I think the depth is fine. Now, would you like to replace that depth and what they can bring to the table with one guy? Sure. But sometimes that's not feasible, especially if you think George Pickens is going to have the year that we hope he does. If that's a 1,400 yard season and double-digit touchdowns out of this guy, then you're going to have to pay him. And if you do that, you can't afford to have two two highly paid wide receivers on your roster. It's hard to do that. Some teams make it a priority, like the Dolphins, but they don't have super highly paid players on defense. They're sacrificing elsewhere to make that happen on offense. So are the Steelers going to do that? I have my doubts. Let's see here. Going back, Blue Nose Steelhead has a good comment here to the Elliott conversation. Elliott and Roberts in the middle are beasts that let the rest of the team feed. Absolutely. I think that those guys can anchor down some things and kind of be the stabilizers in the middle of the field for other people to go be disruptors, other people to go be game changers. So I think that plays into this as well. All right, let's see. Not seeing any more questions, so I want to hit a couple things. If you have any more questions, go ahead and put those in. Obviously, we'll get to them. But I wanted to bring up a couple things that I'm very intrigued about as the rest of the weeks progress here. Offensive line rotation. We're seeing a lot of guys get first-team reps. The Steelers are piecing in guys to see what they can do. And that's important. I think the Steelers do as good a job as anybody of deciding whether their rookies are ready to play or not. And in a lot of cases, they say, no, not yet. Maybe not because you're not the better player, but maybe because you're more mistake prone. Maybe because we just need to get something rolling here, and then we can try to make that switch. This year it's going to play a little different for the Steelers because they have two guys on the offensive line that they absolutely have to get up to speed ASAP to try to make this unit play at its highest potential. And so how they keep rotating this offensive line. Is Dan Moore Jr. going to hold on to that left tackle spot? That's the big question to me. I think that Broderick Jones wants it bad. And I think that Troy Fautanu has shown us enough to where I think he can start at right tackle, even in just what we've seen in 4 days. The guy's got some serious power and some serious tenacity up front. And let's be real, people. The best thing for the Steelers is to get Broderick Jones starting at his best position, left tackle. And if he can do that, sooner than later, the Steelers aren't better for it. They just are. Broderick Jones is a better run blocker than Dan Moore Jr. ever will be already. And Troy Fautanu probably is as well. So you're talking about, can we protect the quarterback? And I think that is something that the Steelers are going to have to consider with this whole process. But it's very intriguing. It really is to see how that goes. That is one of the things that I am looking forward to. Okay, we got some tight end comments and questions in here. Dennis Povak says, I honestly think, excuse me, honestly think we will use the tight ends more and throw to the running back, so I don't see a real problem. That's a good point, and I kind of agree with that. I think that the offense is going to spread the ball around to these secondary, tertiary options. And in that case, you got guys that can handle that, I think. And I think Pat Fryermuth is going to be a huge part of this offense, which brings me to this from Joseph. Would you consider a tight end as a wide receiver two, or as a wide receiver two capability? I think Fryermuth could be that for sure. I don't think he would ever be the Steelers' first option as a pass catcher, like a Travis Kelce or like a Sam Laporta probably is now. Maybe even you got Marvin Harrison Jr. over in Arizona, but Trey McBride, those kind of guys are rare. I don't think Pat Fryermuth would grade out as highly as them in the same draft. Obviously, he went in the second round. Those guys are first-round talents. And then you're talking about a player, too, that isn't quite as good a blocker as you might like. Now, he's not terrible. That's misconstrued a lot of times. But I think as a wide receiver, too, he can definitely be that type of producer for the team. As the second best pass catcher on the team, I think that he's definitely got that ability. So I'm interested to see how that plays out as well. Okay, let's see. This is a great question from Afton Ford. Afton, thank you as always. Does Love's contract mean bad things for us next year? If Justin Fields wins the starting job in 2024 and he puts together a Jordan Love-like season as a passer and runner, now it's not going to look exactly like Love, right? It's going to look a little different. But if he puts up a Lamar Jackson type season, then yes, it's a problem because he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid a bunch of cash somewhere. And so the Steelers are going to have to figure that out. Now, Russell Wilson, if Russell Wilson puts together a Jordan Love season, he's at a point in his career where you don't have to offer him $55 million and he shouldn't expect anybody to. So I think that, if he does that, maybe you're looking at $40 million, which to me is fine. If you're going to get top 10 quarterback play-ish, top 12 quarterback play for $40 million, I'm totally fine with that. I mean, look at what the Dolphins just paid Tua Tagovailoa, who to me is not a top 10 quarterback. He's as much a product of his system as anybody in the league. So yeah, he operates it well, but you take him outside of that and what is he? That's a big question mark. So the Steelers have to believe in Fields enough to give him that type of contract. I think that the more likely scenario is that I've said this from the jump, is that Russell Wilson's just kind of their best quarterback that they've had since like 2018 Ben Roethlisberger this year, and he gets a mid-tier Baker Mayfield type contract extension at the end of the year, and Justin Fields moves on. This could also be a one-year rental for Russ, and the Steelers are willing to ride with Fields next year and see how that plays out. I think a lot of that determines or is based on what the Steelers' final record is, and if they make a playoff run. If they make a playoff run with Russell Wilson, you can bet that Russell Wilson will be back next year. If they don't, then all options in the air. If Justin Fields wins the job or takes it over at some point because of injury and you can't keep him off the field at that point and they win a playoff game, then yeah, I think Fields probably gets a contract, and it might be another Baker Mayfield type thing until you see what he can be. Is he going to be willing to take that? Is somebody going to be willing to outmatch that on the open market? Because he's going to be a free agent. So it could mean there's going to be some difficult decisions for the Steelers at the end of the season. And so be wary, Steeler fans, what you're asking for. If you're asking for an AFC Championship appearance, then to me that means Russell Wilson was your starter all year, and you're going to have to pay Russell Wilson, and Justin Fields walks out the door for all the Justin Fields fans. If you're wanting that Steeler or that Mike Tomlin winning season streak to end, then it might be Justin Fields gets a cheap extension next year, and you see what you got next year. So be careful what you wish for. Either way, you're going to have some crazy options to have to discuss at the end of this season. Alrighty. Brian Brown with a great quippy question here. If Myles Garrett gets a pressure, does it count as 2 sacks this year? No, but it will for Micah Parsons. So the NFL focus will switch now. It'll move from Garrett because now he's got his DPOY, and it'll go to I can't think of his name again, and I just said it. The Cowboys pass rusher, and they've got to get him his now because he's such a dynamic player, and So I don't know how it's all going to play out. Micah Parsons is what it is. I get Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons, their names confused in my mind. So I always try to say Miles something for Parsons, but it's not. It's Micah. It's Micah Parsons. And I think that he's going to be the NFL darling on the defensive side of the ball this year. It could also be it could also be Max Crosby, but I don't have as big a problem with that. Max is a hard working guy who, he doesn't deal with all of the high level PFF stuff to make him feel like he's good. He's just a hard worker, a stat guy, and he goes after quarterbacks. So I'm interested to see how that plays out, though. I really am. All righty, let's see here. Here's a good question. How does the new kickoff rules pan out, and will they keep it next year? I think it's here to stay. And I think there's going to be a lot of eyes. Mike Tomlin said this. There's going to be a lot of eyes on the Hall of Fame game for good reason. I think it's no holds barred in special teams over the preseason. They're going to play all out 100%. They might not dive too deep into the bag of tricks, but they're going to get a feel for how this kickoff thing is going to work, because nobody wants to go into the season up against the first team they play and they lose because somebody returns 2 kickoffs for a touchdown. Nobody wants to be there. So they're going to try these things out. They're going to figure it out. I think it's here to stay, though. I think it's something that the NFL wants to bring this play back into football as something exciting. I'm excited for it. Ooh, good question here from Joseph again. Any update on Corey Trice? From what I've heard, he's flashed at times, but he's just kind of been solid. His stock hasn't really gone up or down. He's just kind of been there. And, a guy coming off an injury like this, it's just good to have him out on the field and see what he can do. He's a wild card for this team, yes, because if he can grow, if he can be a really good corner, then you've got a lot of guys who can do a lot of things back there. But also, how much can we expect from a guy first year off of the torn ACL? That is a big question, because a lot of times it takes multiple years for those guys to get back to where they were. So he's one to watch, but from what I've heard, he has kind of been a non-focal point of training camp, but he's been impressive enough to where, he's earning a role on this team. So we'll continue to see how that one plays out. Pittsburgh Toddy asks if Moore ends up on the bench, Dan Moore Jr. Is he trade bait or a valuable backup? I don't think he's a valuable backup. To me, it's cut bait, trade bait, send him somewhere, get something for him. But a guy who cannot swing as a backup, as your first backup tackle, it doesn't compute with me. It just doesn't. I'd rather go with Dylan Cook, who it sounds like can play either side, than to have Dan Moore Jr. still on the roster. And then if Broderick Jones wins the left tackle job and starts at left tackle, and Troy Fautanu plays right tackle, if Troy Fautanu gets injured, then you have to move Jones over to the right so Dan Moore Jr. can play left. That's a no-go for me. So if Dan Moore Jr. doesn't outright win this left tackle job, I think you get what you can for him and let somebody else pay him to be their left tackle, or bring him in to be their left tackle for a year or two. And he might be just fine for them, but I think you got to be willing to make that move if you're the Steelers. Okay, let's see. Ooh, good point. Good question from Daniel Red, talking about the quarterbacks again. Do you think both quarterbacks want to stay and play for Mike Tomlin? I think he's a big draw for some of these guys. And I think for Fields and Wilson, that is definitely the case. But I don't think it would outweigh the money for either one necessarily. Maybe more Russell Wilson because of his, I almost said advanced age, but that's just in football terms. Maybe the 36 turning 37-year-old would want to just play for a guy he's comfortable with the last 3 years of his career than to jump around wherever the money goes. But for Fields, I think it's whoever pays him the most money at the end of this year is going to get his services. I don't think he's going to stick around as a backup in Pittsburgh if Russell Wilson beats him out, right? And I also don't think that if he wins the job and the Steelers aren't willing to pay him high-end QB money, that he sticks around there either, because somebody else will be willing to. So that to me is the question mark. Okay. Let me pull this up. I'm sorry, from Mr. Man 3523. This came out wrong, and I want to clarify then. Micah Parsons is a hard worker. He is a fantastic player. He really is. I just meant with my Max Crosby comment is that Max Crosby is a workman style player. To me, he's a TJ Watt style player. They have their high motor guys that have zero quit in them. Major, massive competitors. And I'm not saying Micah Parsons isn't those things, but I do think Micah Parsons is more of athletic freak, does freakish things player. That is the style you view him in. I don't view him in the same style as I do TJ Watt and Max Crosby. So that's where that comes from. But I apologize for any offense that I may have caused to Micah Parsons fans out there. I did not mean it. He's a fantastic player. But I just don't think he's the same type of player as those two guys. Okay. Let's see here. Well, I think that kind of does it for the questions. So let's do this. I think I'm going to try to get my guest on again next week. He's one of the Steelers beat guys that's out there at training camp. I'll try to get him in again next week. I apologize that didn't work out this week, but we'll get somebody in on this show to answer some questions for you guys straight out of training camp. But maybe, it'll be good to try to get somebody in after Russell Wilson gets back, after we see some padded practices as well. That will be really, really nice. So I'm excited to see what happens with this show and Steelers training camp moving forward. I appreciate all of you tuning in. As always, thank you for your passion about the Steelers, for your interaction on the show. Couldn't do the show without you guys. Always a blessing to be here to talk to you. But that's going to do it for me here on the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. Until next time, y'all have a good one.